everyone, and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashew, and I am joined by two folks who you have heard on this podcast before at the same time, coincidentally, and not at the same time. Talking everybody's favorite writer for DC Titans. He also co-wrote Under Siege 2 and The Mothman Prophecies. He is Headless Richard Hatem.
Good to be back.
And our good friend from PulpSerenade.com, Creepy Cullen Gallagher.
Creepy. Ooh.
I don't know.
All right, I'll take it.
It's like that Simpsons thing, right? Bat groaning. Hasn't Matt Groening been doing that for like 30 years now?
Oh my goodness.
It still works?
Yes, I am new to Simpsons, and I have been shown a bunch of the Halloween episodes, and I love the Halloween episodes where they mess with the names.
I mean, if you're going to do it, go all the way, right?
Yeah. Wait, what'd you call me? What name did you give me so I can...
Headless Richard Hatem.
Oh, no, that's good, because that was my first big, when I was literally in kindergarten, I was obsessed with Legend of Sleepy Hollow, probably because of the Disney animated one, but I just thought, that was the scariest thing ever, so I'm happy to be Headless Richard Hatem.
And if you'd like to hear Richard tell that story in full, head on over to Scary Stories We Tell and listen to him tell it in full, because you told that story on our podcast.
Did I really? Jesus, I got to listen to some of this.
That's why I said that, Richard.
Nice cross promotion.
Bump, cross promotion. No,
guess. Okay, all right, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, you could think it was a lucky guess, but that would be a lie. Oh boy! But cross promotion aside, we are here on this spooky Horrortober evening to talk about yet another Australian horror film. This time, it's pretty much just Jaws on land. We're talking Razorback.
Out here is where it will find you. She was the last one to see it.
An accident.
Now, he must face it.
Thought you might know what happened to her.
Alone. God has created it. And hell has given it a name. Now, there's a new breed of terror. Razorback.
It's a Razorback.
Razorback. It should have had some kick-ass metal. If it had been made in 87, it probably would have. So the film is directed by Russell McKahey. It is written by Everett DeRoche, who based it off of the book by Peter Brennan. It stars Gregory Harrison, Archie Whiteley, and Bill Kerr. And the film centers around Gregory Harrison, who plays Carl Winters, a man who goes to Australia to find his wife that disappeared. There's a big pig in this movie. That's the fucking draw here, guys. So, Richard, had you seen this film before?
No, I had not seen this film before.
Well, what did you think watching it for the first? I figured you would expound on it more than that, but thank you for being very literal and answering the question.
Usually that's the point where I launch into a way too long, theory on the movie.
I was waiting.
I know. It's like, what, you're stopping? Usually I got to cut you off. I had not seen the movie before. I am unfamiliar with the director's work before and after. I did find it, look, we'll always start the way we always start. It was probably better than I expected, given the synopsis. I found it very atmospheric. This was clearly, someone was super excited about making this movie, and everyone involved took it super seriously, which I feel like, has to be called out because the premise sounds a little goofy.
A little goofy? It's a fucking pig running wild. Richard, now you're being nice.
It's a wild boar. Look, here's the thing. We're stepping into someone else's culture, Chris. We've got to respect that these are Australians. They're not like us. They have a whole cosmology of angels and demons and monsters of which we are not familiar. And perhaps the Razorback, it plays a big role in their lives. And maybe this is something that every child grows up with, the story of the immense, giant, mutant Razorback. He's out there if you misbehave. I don't know. I'm just trying to, toss a little cred to the Australians. I don't know why.
And that's been story time with Uncle Richard Hatem. Just the way you were expounding on it sounded like you were trying to convince us that was the case.
I'm convinced.
I don't know. It's that old line. I don't know enough about I don't know enough about Australian culture to say you're wrong. So,
well, it's sort of like this is like the Australian legend of Boggy Creek.
Kind of, yeah.
It's like
that's a good way to put it.
That's a big deal to some people because it's like, oh my God, I grew up with this, and I'm like, really? Because I'm in America, but I grew up in California. Great, you grew up in the South. You're excited about Boggy Creek. Maybe the Australians excited about a giant boar.
So speaking of boar excitement, Cullen, was this the first time you'd seen the film? And what did you think?
So this was not only the first time I saw the movie, but it's also the first time I read the book by Peter Brennan. And I started the book and then I watched the movie halfway through the book. Because it is a doorstop book, 378 pages. And thanks to Chris, this is now the longest book I have read in probably 10 years or more. The book.
You want to do an It podcast?
No.
Yeah, me either. I've already done it, and it's not as much fun as it sounds.
So to answer the second part of your question, what did I think of it? The movie's a hell of a lot better than the book. The book is just a fucking mess. Written by the future creator of Judge Judy and Judge Joe Brown.
That wasn't a joke.
No.
Really?
Richard, really?
So he's
die earlier today, and this is some weird alter consciousness I'm living through.
It fucking might be.
So I don't, to my knowledge, Peter Brennan is not Australian, and to me this really reads like someone needed to sell a book based on the Dingoes Ate My Baby case. Which was a year before the book came out. But, Richard, to your point about how silly the story is, the boar is a very small part of the book. The book begins sort of with this really promising first few pages where it's switching between the Razorback who's turned cannibal, and it's like there's a drought and it's hungry and it's eating its own. There's like a lamb that's like pregnant, and then there's a kangaroo, and it's like has its baby kangaroo, and it's like which is going to get eaten first, and it's this whole metaphor about nature and animals, and then it switches to a manager for the pet food company whose employee got drunk and crashed a car and lost 3,000 cans of food that was supposed to go to the U.S. So this guy takes 3,000 cans that were supposed to go to Hong Kong and sends them to the U.S. instead, and then he tells his boss. His boss gets pissed and fires him. The boss didn't tell him that the cans that were meant for Hong Kong are actually filled with diamonds that are being smuggled out of the country. Meanwhile, the guy that got fired, when he was busy transferring the cans, he didn't go home and missed a holiday, so now his wife and children have left him. So now he wants to get revenge on his company. Enter Beth, the woman who was in Australia doing the news about the slaughtering of the kangaroos. I can go on and on and on, but there are so many subplots, including like weird in-law relations. There's like organized crime. There's like politicians that are corrupt. They're hiring hitmen to go after. There's like union struggles. Like the boar barely plays a role.
It's so weird because I hear all this stuff, like, I immediately just go back to that place where, like, I'm in high school and I've got to write a paper about something. And I just automatically assume, well, all of this stuff must make sense if you just look at it from the right angle. like maybe there was some weird political situation in Australia, and all of this stuff is a metaphor for something that I don't quite get, which is sort of how I felt watching the movie. I'm like, okay, well, you got the animal rights and the poachers and the pet food company and these sort of weird backcountry Australian guys. Well, all that, these all must be real strong cultural signifiers for 1984 Australia. People walk into the movie theater and go, oh, well, I get this. I mean, I know who these guys are. I know exactly all the inside jokes and everything. And I just sort of figured, well, all right, I just don't know this stuff, but it's all got to mean something, right?
I mean, my interpretation of the movie adaptation of this book is that the screenwriter who had done Long Weekend, which I think is a great sort of eco horror movie. Have either of you seen that? It's like 78, 79 Australian movie. This really shitty couple goes into the woods one weekend and nature fights back. That's the plot. It's like it's like tiny chamber drama cast, really sort of minimalist effects, really effective movie. So I think he's a good writer, but I feel like when he came to Razorback, the book, it's just like, how do you find a story that you can tell in a movie that makes a modicum of sense? And so many elements in the movie, they're all in the book, but when you start slashing stuff away, you realize there's so much stuff in this book that didn't make sense in the first place. Weird plot threads. So I think they did the best job they could trying to fashion a story in this movie. But to me, the movie's strength is less in the plot than it is just, I thought there were some really effective scenes with the animatronic boar, the photography, the editing. To me, those were the good parts about the movie.
So I hadn't seen this either. This was a suggestion by our good friend Jess Byard, but it was on my list of things to watch. We all have a list. Things go on the list. Nobody ever watches anything on the list. The list just gets longer. And if anyone ever makes a dent in the list, please tell me otherwise. But I have a list of things that I will never get around to.
Of course. No, I got it.
Yeah. So Razorback was on that list. And obviously I finally got around to watching it for this podcast. And I think you both have already touched on something that's very important with my kind of thoughts on the film. It is a film that, for no realistic reason, should this film be taking itself seriously. Because it's about a giant fucking boar that eats people alive. Okay? This movie should not be taking itself seriously. At least not as seriously as it does take itself. And I think it feels like, to me, it's taking itself as seriously as Jaws took itself seriously.
I don't see that as a drawback, though.
No, but it's not. But the issue is, if you're going to take yourself that seriously, you need to really go for it. And, like, the problem I have with parts of this movie is they don't do a good enough job developing certain characters for us to get invested in that character. And then there's other characters that are completely forgotten about and aren't given any time to grow, or introduced so late into the film that they're not given anything to do. And then the film, to your point, Cullen, it has a lot of really interesting scenes, and there are a lot of scenes that work really well, and a lot of interesting things are done in these scenes. And this film has an interesting sense of style, especially with the use of lighting and color. And for me, this film should have done more things to kind of stand out and really be... It's a movie. I mean, if I pitch to you, hey, you want to watch this movie? It's about a giant boar that eats people in the Australian outback. Like, that sounds like it's going to be an 80s creature feature to the gills. And this is a lot more serious than it needs to be if you're trying to make a creature feature. It feels like a film stuck between tones. Does it want to be a serious horror movie that has some ecological implications, one might say? Or do you want to be a movie about a giant fucking pig that eats people alive? because you kind of can't be both.
I see your point, and I would agree, but I would just point out with the in terms of the scenes, I think that might have something to do with the director's background, because he had been doing music videos up until this point, and I feel like that's the way he probably conceived this. It's like, how do you go from making, Video Killed the Radio Star, or I'm Stranded for the Saints, he's shooting like Elton John and tons of stuff for Duran Duran. Now he has to do
which was featured on the soundtrack.
Yep. Yeah, in the car.
Yeah.
A lesser Duran Duran hit, New Moon on Monday.
Yeah.
I liked that. But yeah, I don't know. To me, like, that's what's... I mean, that's the strength of the movie, because that's the director's background, and that's what he knows how to do, and I sort of feel like he was able to get in there and really get, some really atmospheric, like, incredible scenes. And yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't think the script is... I mean, it's kind of half-baked. A lot of the problems are in the novel, and they couldn't figure out how to solve them. And on second and third viewing of the movie, it really seems like they're just trying to figure out how to hide those flaws and just move past them as quickly as possible.
Right, and it's hard to tell if it was a matter of budget or time or just a director whose imagination was bigger than his means. But it also, the one thing that it sort of triggered for me was that it reminded me that in the 80s, there was like this sort of big moment for Australian films and Australian filmmakers. It was sort of a thing. And maybe it was sort of post Mad Max, that suddenly was like, oh, Australia's got this burgeoning, film movement, and there's actually movies being made and interesting. And I don't know, maybe it had to do with funding for the arts in some way, but during the 80s, I remember that it was like a big deal. Australian films were like, ooh, what's this crazy Australian film? Because that's when I was going to film school. That was still something you talked about, which I don't think you really talk about that much anymore. I think it really is, what are the Australians doing?
From what I remember, Richard, it did have a lot to do with, government funding. Like, I think it wasn't until the mid-70s that Australia really had a national film industry. And yeah, it was like the mid-70s, and they started giving guys like, Peter Weir money to make movies. And then I think like also some of the early Ozploitation by like Brian Trenchard Smith, who's doing wacko exploitation stuff. He was also getting some money, I think, from the government. But it was just like all of a sudden Australia was really invested in, like, we have these directors. Oh, some of them are doing weird shit we can send to drive-ins around the world. Oh, we have some other stuff that we can start putting in more prestigious film festivals. And I sort of love that they're happening at the same time. The guy who edited this, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but he edited Tender Mercies for Bruce Beresford, who was another Australian director. And I just adore Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Again, that was early, mid-'80s. Wasn't that like 83, 82?
Yeah, around then.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, it was a great moment for movies. And this is also the same...
For Peter Weir, George Miller. I mean, now it's all coming back to me. There were a handful of real names that were like, yeah, they came from Australia. Now they're making big movies.
This is the same DP as Road Warrior, and the woman who played Beth, I think, went on to co-write some movies with George Miller. I think she co-wrote Babe, Pig in the City, and Happy Feet.
Oh my God, is that right?
I was looking her up.
Well, there was definitely like a Road Warrior vibe to a lot of the scenes, and to sort of like the bad guys, those two sort of like freaky
Australian rednecks,
poacher. Yeah, the redneck poacher hunter, guys they're kind of funny, like you kind of like them, but they're just fucking depraved. I'm like, yeah, there's a little Road Warrior going on in here.
So, Cullen, this is something that you touched on when you were mentioning that the book was written by someone who's clearly not Australian. Peter Brennan is an American. And to me, the movie, and I didn't read the book, obviously. I did not get a chance to read it.
That's okay. I did it for you.
Sounds like you took the bullet. Thank you for your service. It sounds almost like it's a book written by someone who knows Australia only through certain avenues. At least that's what the movie feels like. The movie feels like it really turns hard into Mad Max. And like visually being kind of in that same milieu as Mad Max. And like there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't really turn into that style and then expect us to be like, this is a serious film.
The book might be totally full of shit. I don't have the knowledge, but it does go much more into like the ecology of, you know, what's going on with animal and wildlife. And, you know, I don't know whether kangaroos were used in dog food or not. But part of what they're talking about is like, oh, you know, there's no population control. So killing the kangaroos is for this. And then, you know, another part has to do with the way those two guys are hunting. At least according to the book, they're like, it's called butt shooting, where you shoot the kangaroo and it doesn't die. So then in the morning when you pick them all up, they're still kind of alive, so they're easier to skin. But those guys are so stupid they can't find all of the kangaroos they killed. So there are all these rotting kangaroo corpses, and that draws the boars. So that's why the Razorback comes.
This sounds a little bit like what people explain to me as Moby Dick. It's like, you wouldn't like most of Moby Dick. It's a lot of stuff about whaling.
I love Moby Dick. I love to me, Moby Dick is just insane. I love like how it jumps from chapter to chapter doing something totally esoteric. I thought that was fun. Razorback does not have that Melvillian, panache, that funness to it.
None of the people involved in Razorback are a genius like Melville. I feel safe in saying that. But what was I going to say? The thing about the what kangaroo meat is used for. I don't know if you guys remember. It's like, again, late 80s, early 90s. There was a whole scandal that Jack in the Box was using kangaroo meat, and the jokes going around town were calling the restaurant Jack in the Pouch. Do you remember this at all?
I don't. But that's
I think we're a little. I think we might be a little too young for that one.
Okay,
Jack in the Pouch.
Okay.
I would have been alive at that point, but
I remember that vividly. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, there were certain like signifiers that were like, okay, this feels like it was a thing. And even that sort of eco horror movie, like there was a movie that I barely even can remember if it was like am I the only one who remembers it? Was it a dream? Was it real? It was in the mid 70s, late 70s, called an American movie called Prophecy. And it had to do with some weird globby monster out in the woods, but the monster had sort of been created by like pollution in the lake or the river or something. Do you guys remember this at all?
I vaguely remember this. I feel like I saw it super, super late at night. I was probably coming home from a bar and fell asleep during it. It's on that list you guys have talked about. And it's a subsect of that list, which is I think I might have watched this, so I might rewatch it, but I have other things that I want to watch. So it's the likelihood of me rewatching this is even lower.
Like for you, the curiosity is, was it all alcohol induced, or did this movie really play out the way I seem to recall it? And mine is like, because it came out when I was still like in grade school or something. It was in the 70s. And I just remember seeing the commercials and not knowing what it was about, but it was really scary. Like, it really scared me when I was 11. And then later hearing that when I found out what it was about, I was in high school, and even by then I was like, okay, that sounds lame. So moving on. But yeah, but that connects up with this sort of like, yeah, we're going to do a horror movie, but there's an ecological aspect to it. So, I guess they can check that one off their list. I'm impressed they got Gregory Harrison. I mean, to me, that was like, oh, okay, man, they were looking for some international distribution. Like, they were like, we need to get an American star.
Which is funny because do you know who they originally considered for the role of Carl Winters?
No.
Mel Gibson?
Jeff Bridges.
Whoa.
Okay, yeah.
So speaking of international appeal, I mean, Gregory Harrison obviously has international appeal, but what's funny is Jeff Bridges at the time was said to have no international appeal, which, given hindsight...
Huh. That's weird. Didn't he have internet? I mean, he was a star, wasn't he? It was the Last Picture Show. He was something, right? I mean, Gregory Harrison was clearly known for Trapper John MD. This feels like it was post or mid Trapper John, and if that show was being sold overseas, then they could at least tie into that on some level. But I mean,
Jeff Bridges was in Tron. He was in Tron at this point.
Tron, come on.
And King Kong.
Well, come on. That's why he was top of the list.
It's just weird that he had no international appeal. It's like, I thought, well, I guess Tron is remembered a lot more fondly now than it was at the time.
Well, I mean, it was big at the time. I mean, it was like, whether the movie was any good, people were excited about it. I will say this, Gregory Harrison, I thought, did a really nice job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Very likable.
I think all the actors really went into their role.
Yeah. I mean, literally to the point of where I was sort of like, wait, whatever happened to Gregory Harrison? Like, did he have some big career in the 80s and into the 90s and beyond?
No.
Not really.
Because I'm like, he's, completely credible, decent actor. Like, not embarrassed. On no level was it like, oh boy, he's not up to the, dramatic task of Razorback. I thought he was one of the probably the best thing in it.
Well, he's very likable as the lead, and you spend most of the time in the film with him, looking for his wife. That obviously just bites at 5 minutes. It feels like 5 minutes in the movie. It's not 5 minutes into the movie, but I like that framing device because you do get to kind of see his character go through the realization that his wife is dead, and he doesn't find that out until it feels like almost near the end of the film.
Right. And he sort of goes
but
through
he's good.
A bit of a like they I guess they give his character a little bit of a not a man called horse, but at least a little bit of like, oh, I'm the city boy who has to go among the unwashed backcountry, physical men and survive a trial of physicalness, thereby, connects with something, I guess. But by the end, what happens?
I was going to say, in the end, he winds up, he has to, kill the Razorback. He has to do what all the professional hunters and all, the, local people, what they could not do.
Exactly. He's got to prove that he is worthy and equal to a physical task. It's almost, I guess that's shades of Richard Dreyfuss a little bit, or maybe more Brody in Jaws. I guess I'm sorry.
Well, if you're going with the Jaws comparison, which I think is the apt comparison, like he is very much kind of the Roy Scheider character with a little bit of the Dreyfuss character, and then obviously Bill Kerr, who I loved Bill Kerr in this film as Jake Cullen. Yeah. He plays the Quint. I would say Quint, who is obviously a derivation of Ahab from Moby Dick, but I like that character too because you get that did a dingo eat your baby? That's the character that doesn't get that final aha moment, which kind of bummed me out. It felt like the final act of the film didn't really know where it wanted to go because if it was me, I would have had the Carl Winters and Jake Cullen character having that fight with the Razorback at the end of the film together, and then one of them sacrifices the other one to kill the Razorback, not having these two kind of Australian redneck yo-yo dudes. I mean, these guys are nutso characters, like you said. They're like from Mad Max. They end up killing him, and it's just like, okay, great.
They have more motivation for killing him in the book. I'm already forgetting exactly what it is. It has to do with like they're working for, I can't remember. I think they're trying to suppress some information from coming out. related. I think they're hired by the pet food company. Because in the book, the pet food company is this big, organization. It's not some like shack, in the desert.
Wait a second, but the two Mad Max guys, the two weird punky butt shooters, they don't kill Bill Kerr. I thought the Razorback killed Bill Kerr.
They leave him to die. They like.
Oh, okay. Because it's like I'm trying to like balance all the story values. It's like if those guys messed with Gregory Harrison's wife, but it's like, did they kill her or did the Razorback kill her? Like who in the storytelling math, who does Gregory Harrison have to kill? He has to preside over the death of those thugs, even though he doesn't kill them personally, the Razorback, and then he ultimately kills the Razorback in Bill Kerr's stead, because he and Bill Kerr don't really have a relationship in the movie. It's not like they become close and now one owes a blood debt to the other to finish this business. It's not one of those.
No.
I had a hard time really being invested in those two characters. I mean, I appreciate what they kind of add to the film, but the Dicko and Benny characters, like, I was just not. They felt like they were just getting in the way of the other story. You know what I mean? They just felt like they didn't add much.
Yeah, they were there in the opening scene testifying against Jake Cullen. They were the ones saying the Razorback didn't really exist. And they're like, oh, all you have to do is say boo and the Razorback will go away. So like they not only, made Jake Cullen seem like he's the one who, kidnapped and killed his grandson, but then they sort of like demoted him in the eyes, of the community. Like he's no longer a great hunter. That led to him, becoming an outcast or wound up breaking up his family. So I think there's more of a personal vendetta that he feels against the two of them.
But it all like they were stand-ins for sort of a type of man that Gregory Harrison was going to ultimately have to deal with or confront, or like they're it's the straw dogs of it all or something. It's like Gregory Harrison.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Like that's what they exist for, just to be these sort of gross, crass, disgusting, testosterone oozing, primitives.
Yeah, I think you're totally right.
And like I think that's okay when that is the main push of the film. But in this movie, with what this film was trying to do, I felt like it would have been better to just leave it as just the Razorback is the villain and let that story breathe and let that story have time to really kind of do its part to give you a reason to hate the Razorback and to want Carl and Jake and Sarah to kill that creature and get it, so it finally gets its comeuppance for destroying their lives. And we don't get that. We get Carl killing the Razorback, but even then it doesn't really feel like the story kind of hit all the beats that it needed to.
Right. I totally agree that there was clearly like this sort of ambivalence about the Razorback as the villain. It was sort of like the Razorback is the villain, and yet it is somehow mythical and elevated in a certain way. And you almost didn't want to celebrate its death too much because it only exists as a result of man fucking with its natural. Like it's weird. Like in Jaws, they never did that. They never said, well, you realize I don't recall. It's not like, well, the great white is coming in and feeding on people now because of overfishing. So we actually are to blame for the great white. They never did that in that one. And yet it is a way that some of these stories go where you can't make this element of nature the villain. It always has to come back on man's fuckery with the natural environment that led to this aberration. And that's clearly what they were going for here.
And I guess I wanted them to do a better job of telling that story if that's what they were going for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree. It was not wholly satisfying in any direction.
Yeah, and then I think part of the ending for me, one of the weird things is I love the set, I love the weird factory, and then the Razorback kind of dies off screen. Spoiler alert, I should have said that first. It was kind of anticlimactic, because, like, I love the scene of the Razorback. I mean, the opening scene is amazing. It fucking runs through the house, it destroys the house is burning down. It's like, that's an opening. And then the next kill, it goes after the wife, and it's like breaking into the car, and it's up against the glass, and it's like really up close and personal. It's terrifying. That's great. Then when it goes after Jake, it's like, coming through the, the side of this, like enclosure, this like kind of like steel hut or something. It's like, oh man, this thing's everywhere. And now it's like face to face with the Razorback. Oh, it's off screen there in the background. It's going away. There's a little bit of matter spewing everywhere, but it just kind of like it started like almost like at 10. And then when it got to the end, it's like, yeah, we're going to end on like a 4.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that
sense, but it didn't really deliver on like, the Razorback is getting its comeuppance. It was like, okay, I guess it fell into that thing.
Well, and that's my issue with the movie is like the payoff at the end for as big of a problem and as big of a kind of a monster as this Razorback is throughout the film, killing a child, killing this guy's wife, dragging that guy's TV off, like this creature. I mean, that's the best scene in the entire movie, right?
That scene is amazing. And I feel like that's when for me, that's like when like the editing, the set, the effects, that actor who they got to play, that's fucking awesome, the look on his face. But yeah, to me, that's what the director, like, with his background and like creating music videos in these like short little like 3-minute dramatic set pieces. Like, that is when this movie excels.
Yes. Yeah, that was an amazing bit. It took me a while to realize, well, the TV wouldn't still be on, would it? As it's dragged off into the night. But it was so great that it was on, and that the comedian is still telling, he's doing his monologue as it disappears into the outback night. That was that was a highlight.
But, the rest of the film doesn't have that. And there's long stretches of time, especially when we're talking about Archie Whiteley's character, who plays Sarah. This character gets introduced like, what feels like 2/3 of the way through the movie, and then she's not given a whole lot to do, and then she's knocked out during the climax, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, why did you introduce this character to begin with if she's not going to factor into the finale of the film, unless you're just giving Gregory Harrison's character a love interest, which is what it felt like. But to me, the film didn't need it. This film is a man's journey to avenge his wife's death at the hand of a monster. And
after they took out the sister from the book, it's like the sister used to date the husband before he was married to her sister, and now that Beth is missing, her sister got a phone call that like Beth is dead, so she starts boning the husband, but doesn't tell the husband that, like, by the way, your wife is probably dead, and he starts sleeping with her, not realizing that his wife might be dead. The weird in-law, romance aspect of the book, I'm so glad they got rid of that. It did not work. It was stupid. It's terrible. And it makes the characters are a lot more distasteful in the book, especially the husband. They really did a big job to make the husband a likable person.
Which is good, because if you had a character that was not likable, I would have been even less invested in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, Gregory Harrison was a good choice, and the way they depicted his character, that was enough to, to get you through the middle of the movie and sort of go, okay, all right, well, we're kind of with this guy. I like this guy well enough. All right. But it did almost feel like it was going to go to a point where we were going to meet like an outback, shaman of some sort who was going to tell us the legend of the Razorback, I felt like the movie was just atmospheric enough. They could have gone there if they had to and if they wanted to, and I would have been on board.
Yeah. Have you all seen The Car with Brolin, James Brolin?
No. What?
It's late 70s. It's post Jaws, but that's what sort of makes me bring it up, because it's about a car that's just will randomly appear in the Southwest and terrorizes a town, and the car can't be stopped. It just runs everybody over. So to me, there's some similarities to Razorback, and I remember liking the car. Like it had like that right amount of like, it is a little goofy. It knows it's Jaws light with a car in the desert. It's a little, schlocky, but, to me that had like the right balance of like, we're not too scary, but we're enough to be a late 70s horror movie. It would have been great at a drive-in.
Well, that's kind of the big takeaway from this movie is I feel like, similarly to some other films we've talked about recently, it feels like a film caught between two styles. Either go with that like kind of well lit, well defined like edges and music and like the contrast between light and dark that you kind of expect from these like 80s horror films. Do that or do the eco horror movie. But the problem is if you don't pick one or the other, you can't do either very well. And when it kind of mixes in between the two, it doesn't work very well. But when it leans on one or the other, I'm really invested in the film. But when it doesn't know what it wants to be, it starts to kind of fall apart. And the end of the film, for me, feels like it wraps up way too quickly. It's not a very satisfying ending, given the fact that, like you mentioned, Cullen, the Razorback just dies off screen. And you have characters who you've been introduced to that are supposed to be, getting some sort of comeuppance against this creature or against the two brothers. And they kind of don't.
Yeah.
And I don't know why everybody's killed off screen.
Oh, probably has to do with budget.
That's kind of unfortunate, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was a censor kind of thing, because there was a lot of there were a lot of really ugly, brutal moments. So I can't imagine it was just a matter of, well, the Australian Film Board doesn't like blood or something.
I read an interview with the director, and he was saying, he wanted to have more stuff off screen because he wanted people's imaginations, to take over.
That's what you say when you don't have enough money. I've said it myself.
Well, I didn't need more gore personally. Like I was fine. I was so excited. Just like I love the animatronics in this. Like that boar it looks cool. It's massive. It destroys a house. Like I'm very satisfied with the boreness of this movie.
More boar, less gore.
Always more boar. Doesn't matter what movie it is. Can you think of a movie where the presence of a boar has been a detriment?
I can't think of movies that have a lot of boars in them, to be perfectly honest with you.
Maybe this is the problem.
Lord of the Flies.
More boar, please.
Lord of the Flies that's got some.
Oh yeah, that does. Smaller, not Razorbacks.
I like how this film was pitched as Jaws on Trotters.
Yeah, that's
pretty much.
Gold.
Yeah, that's.
Look,
that's how you sell something, I guess.
Look, like you said, Cullen, the animatronic's pretty good. The acting is good. Again, for me, there are some things that are left to, kind of ponder what the film could have been if it had gone kind of in more one direction or the other. And again, I'm of the mindset that those two brother characters either need to be, I don't know if they don't need to be a part of the movie, but they either need to be a bigger part of the movie or not a part of the movie at all. Because it feels like they're from a different movie altogether, on top of everything else.
Yeah, the script is just what kind of falls apart in this movie. I love the photography. I love the sort of surreal qualities that some of the scenes have. Like, the kills all feel very, otherworldly. When the husband character is sort of left out there on the desert plains, waiting for those two creepoids to, pick him up, and, and the Razorback's chasing him, and he goes into the water to hide. And he spends a whole night sleeping on like a windmill, and then like the weird it was like a horse skeleton comes out of the ground.
That's what it was. It was like, I think it was in that was the part where I was like, is this going to go like, is he like on some weird vision quest? Is he going to see the mythical, Razorback god? And yeah, it did get a little, it got weird, but I did like it.
Yeah, the visual aspect of this movie, the acting, the score is terrific too. The synth score I thought was great. But the script, I applaud them for trying, but it's a mess, and I mean, at a certain point you just can't hide that when at the end of the day. Or at least they weren't able to hide it.
Well, and like you said, I mean, it's just there are some things about this movie that again, it's a choice, right? I mean, I wish that there was more of that cool 80s synth music and the style throughout. But like, I think for what the film is, it's pretty fun.
Yes, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's a giant ass pig running around eating people.
There's not enough of that.
No, there's not. I mean, there is another movie called Boar, and it has Chris Haywood is in it, who plays one of the brothers from this film. So, the only other movie about a giant boar in Australia has one of the actors from the previous film in it. So, go figure.
Did either of you think about the 30 to 50 feral hogs?
Oh my god, I totally did.
I wonder whether the guy has seen this movie. I kept thinking, like, should we send him a copy of the DVD?
So, Richard, we were discussing the 30 to 50 feral hogs meme. Do you know about this?
No.
So apparently, Chris, chime in if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, fuck. How do you even begin with this?
It was a guy on Twitter who was asking a question about the definition of the word assault weapon. And we're not going to get into the semantics of that because this ain't a political podcast. But he was trying to say, like, why do you need an assault weapon? What do you need it for? He's like, why would anyone need an assault weapon?
Right.
And then he keep going, Chris.
He got a response from someone who their picture was a University of Arkansas Razorback, the logo of the thing, and the guy's name was Willie McNabb, and his name is Willie McNabb, and then he has the emoji of a boar at the end of his name. And this is I don't think this is a legit question, but this is someone asking this to be a fucking troll on Twitter. Legit question for rural Americans. How do I kill the 30 to 50 feral hogs that run into my yard within 3 to 5 minutes while my small kids play, excuse me.
Well,
and now there's this whole joke on, well, there was, I think it was like last year, but people were using this, 30 to 50 feral hogs as like a joke.
Right.
What the hell do I do about these 30 to 50 feral hogs running around?
Oh, God. Well, I've got a lot I could say, but it's not a political podcast, so I guess we'll move on.
But, Richard, how does one deal with 30 to 50 feral hogs that are running near their house when their children are playing
Let me
outside?
put it this way. As a father of small children, I live in an area where there are not feral hogs, but there are other perceived dangers from automobiles or other things, let's say. So if you think there's a real danger in your yard, you don't take your kid into the fucking yard. You keep your kid in the house until you can move to a safer area. Or you just accept that you live in an area where there's feral hogs, so you better keep the kids inside. And you don't worry about having a fucking automatic weapon to blow them away. Because that's certainly how I wouldn't approach the dangers facing my children in Pasadena.
But you don't have hogs in Pasadena. What if those hogs fought back? What if they came to your house?
How do you clean up 30 to 50 dead feral hogs? That's gotta be...
you cook them and you eat them. That's some good eating.
I mean, Richard is not wrong. As someone who does enjoy going hog hunting, hog meat is good meat. It's good eating.
Yeah, it's all that hunting is a lovely hobby for someone. All right. Now,
Hey, those hogs aren't going to kill themselves, Richard.
yeah.
Maybe they will. Kill yourself, hog. Leave my child alone.
Everybody waking up to a war of their own invention.
It's morning in America. Do you know where your hogs are? Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, we don't have house-size hogs in America, thank God. But I guarantee you, if you saw a pig this size running at you, you'd be petrified.
Yeah, no, that if the Razorback were real, yes, that would be a very scary thing. Buffalo,
and it could eat you alive. Apparently, it eats everybody alive in this movie. But seriously, hey Richard, what would you give the film out of 5?
You know what? I'm gonna give it. I gotta give it a 3. Now, I wanna be clear about the 3 that I'm giving it. The 3 is not it's so bad I'm giving it a 3. It's like, you know what? It was all right, and so I'm giving it a 3. I wouldn't give it a 4 because a 4 is what I give everything that isn't perfect, which gets a 5. So this gets a 3.
What about you, Cullen?
Yeah, 3. It's entertaining. I enjoyed it. I would watch it again. I would show it to other people. I think it has flaws, but I think it has things that are spectacular about it. And yeah, it just feels like it evens out.
It piqued my curiosity about this era of filmmaking, Australian filmmaking, and genre filmmaking. So I came away a richer man.
I'm the same. I've already been looking up the director's other movies. A lot of stuff I hadn't heard of that sounds good. Apparently he directed
Including
The Shadow.
Highlander.
Yeah,
Also
Highlander.
directed Highlander.
I've never seen it.
There you go.
The Shadow's pretty good, though.
Yeah, I think I saw it when it came out, so it's on that list of did I see it? I wouldn't have been drunk when I saw it, though. So I guess that's a second.
That might be the only way you can enjoy it, though.
That's another list of things that I think I've seen, but I'm not 100% sure.
Wait, do you watch when you're drunk? You watch things you've never seen before?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's putting a lot of faith in your drunk self to remember.
Man, it can be fun.
That's fun.
I have many, many fond memories of. God, when was it? At one point, TCM was doing Lubitsch Friday, so I would, on the way home from work, swing by Trader Joe's, get a couple bottles of cheap red wine, and just uncork it and just watch 6 hours of Lubitsch movies, and I would wind up on the floor on my back staring at the TV laughing my ass off.
Oh my God,
the simpler
that sounds
times.
kind of great. Was this in your younger days?
I would have been in I think I was late 20s. I had.
Yeah, that's all right. Are you married? Do you have kids?
I live with my girlfriend. We have no kids.
Okay, all right. I don't know why I tend to factor that into a sort of overall dynamic of time management and how am I allowed to spend the next 6 hours and how deeply can I indulge myself because there's always that point where it's you've got maybe that one decade where it's yeah, you can do that. You can that can be an evening of your choice.
That was I was single and living in a studio apartment when I did the Lubitsch drunk 6-hour marathon. Lauren, my girlfriend, we watched Razorback together. She liked the movie.
God bless her. Yeah, everyone in my house, I watched it upstairs. People would come by, look at the screen for a couple seconds, look at me with their jaw on their chest, and then I'd go, Chris Dash is making me.
I'm known in your household. Mike White is known in my household for the shit that he makes me watch.
And then they're like, okay. And then they get a little sad, and then they walk out.
No.
Oh, nothing to be sad about. Come on. You should have just been hey, come sit down on Pop Big Rich's lap. We're going to watch a movie about pigs that eat people.
Yeah, come on, but pull up a chair. Let me teach you something about film. That's what I should do. I should be
teach
that
you something
guy.
about 30 to 50 feral hogs running around my backyard.
It's okay, Dad. I'll come back.
Yeah, maybe not today. I would give the film a 3 out of 5. I mean, it's fun. I mean, again, if you go into it not expecting, I wouldn't say not expecting much, but go into it knowing that it's a giant movie about a pig that eats people, that takes itself a little too seriously.
Yeah,
it's okay. Richard, come down over there, human soundboard.
It is the accurate sound. If I could make it, I would.
I think that says it all.
It says it all.
Yeah.
Why did we need an hour podcast when, Richard, you could have just made that sound right at the beginning?
Me. And that's it, folks. So on that note, let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
New to the Yabba?
Yes.
Staying long?
No, just tonight.
Oh, that's hard luck. Want to see a bit more of the Yabba than that.
Perfectibility, progress, a vanity spawned by fear. A vanity spawned by fear.
That's right, on the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about Wake in Fright. Never seen it, so I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to be joined by Father Malone, who, once again, Richard, he's not an ordained father of the cloth.
Not a man of the cloth.
And, not a man of the cloth. And my co-host for the upcoming On Seagal podcast, Trevor Gumble. So, we're going to be talking about another movie I haven't seen that is set in Australia. So, I am looking forward to that. Until then, where can people find you, Cullen?
I am more frequently these days at, pulp-serenade.com, writing lots about Day Keane. So if you are interested in the writing career of Day Keane, aka Gunnar Hirtstedt, come on by.
What about you, Mr. Hatem?
Well, I'm currently employed writing and producing the 3rd season of HBO Max's Titans, because we're now on HBO Max. And because we are in the middle of this COVID nightmare, it's taking at least twice as long as it should to get these episodes made. We were actually supposed to do our day of filming today, but because of a COVID testing snafu, it had to get postponed. So it will now be tomorrow, and we'll be filming it, but it'll be on your TV screen, Season 1 and Season 2, available on HBO Max now, and Season 3 coming, hopefully, next fall.
So what you're saying then is, because you guys are taking longer, they should be amazing.
Yeah. No, because we're not taking longer out of our... No.
The answer is no, Richard.
The answer is no. We're not taking longer because of an excess of artistic obsession. We're taking longer because we've had cement blocks tied around our legs because COVID exists in our world now, and yet we are still trying to produce quality entertainment. So Hey, like I can't promise anything. We'll see how it turns out. That's all I got to say.
Stay safe.
Yeah, exactly.
As someone who stays inside consuming entertainment all day, I do appreciate you, Richard, still trying to make this stuff. I can't imagine the hurdles and what it takes to get through all this. So.
It is fascinating and scary because it's difficult to make stuff anyway. And now and believe me, I'm not complaining. These safeguards at all. I take this disease very, very seriously, and yet it is this era will be written about from every angle for 100 years because it's a fucking weird time.
As Dan Carlin of the Hardcore History Podcast said, we are living in an episode of his show. We're in it, folks. We're in the shit.
We sure are. Better days ahead, I'll tell you that much.
I can't wait.
And as for waiting, you can find me waiting for better days on Twitter at casualty_Chris. Big thanks, as always, to our patrons. Big thanks to Richard and Cullen for joining me. And as always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at CultureCast and CultureCast.com. As always, catch you on the next episode.